Good afternoon and welcome to Cloud-12's Coffee Chat for District Leadership. Today's topic is Improving Professional Learning Communities, Part 1. A little bit about myself before we begin. My name is Emmanuel Reddish. I currently serve as the Customer Engagement Manager here at Cloud-12. I have a little over 16 years in education before officially joining the Cloud-12 team. I've had the privilege of serving as a teacher, department chair, building administrator, district administrator, as well as numerous state Department of Education committees. I've had 3 years as a Cloud-12 customer. I expanded from an initial deployment to a district-wide implementation. Also on this call, I have my amazing customer success team. I have Kelly Martinez, Director of Customer Success, Caitlin Day, Customer Success Specialist, Jamie Ulmer, Customer Success Operations Specialist, and Roxanne Bennerman, Customer Success Specialist. So we're all on this call to just assist you, and our goal is just making sure that you're able to meet your goals and have good school and district improvement for everyone. So I want you to quickly just tell me a little bit about yourself, if you will, in the chat space, if you don't mind, if you'll put your first and last name, your role in the district, your district and school name, and where you're located. So that city, or it may be the area, county, or whatever. And if you're wanting to, you can also type in, what do you hope to gain from today's session? All right, our objectives today for our meeting is to discuss what are PLCs? What are those professional learning communities? And what is effective school improvement look like? What are cultural shifts? We're going to talk about Cloud-12 and the 4 guiding questions. Then we're going to end with the PLC Foundation Continuum, and then discuss where are you and how can Cloud-12 elevate this. We'll also have time for questions and brief discussion as well. All right, let me just make sure I'm checking the chat there. All right, we would like to learn more about how Cloud-12 can enhance the work we're doing in our PLCs. That's awesome. And I hope this will answer that. And welcome, Mr. Moat, Assistant Principal in Troup County. Awesome, I love Troup being in the building. This is amazing. Okay, so what are professional learning communities? Professional learning communities is an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students they serve. So it's a collective effort that is very action-based. You're not just talking in theory, you're actually getting in and doing the work. It's a lot of trial and error, and you're doing it recurringly. You're also making sure that you operate under the assumption that the key to improved learning for students is continuous job embedded learning for educators. So we're on the job learning. We're not necessarily going off to a lot of places and learning from others. We're learning from within our own community and building upon that knowledge. We may bring in outside participants, but it's really about building our successes together collaboratively and being interdependent, as you'll hear me talk throughout. So in professional learning communities, you have a focus on learning. So your focus is on learning and making sure that you're being the best that you can be, having that strong success. It's a collaborative culture with a focus on learning for all. A lot of times I hear teachers and sometimes administrators say, you know, I've done everything I possibly can do to help this kid, but they just don't seem to get it. Or I've given them all the information and they're just struggling a little bit. But we have to make sure that we're doing learning for all. Everyone can learn, and we have to have that mindset collectively that there is learning for all, not just 80%, but 100%. All students within our community, within our district and school building are going to learn. It's a collective inquiry into best practice and current reality. So we have to always evaluate where we are and where we want to go, and also make sure that we're doing that by doing. So it's a trial and error. We're constantly learning. If this activity or method didn't work, let's try another strategy that's going to work. And we learn from each other in doing that. There's also a commitment to continuous improvement. So we have to be committed that we're going to improve, and it's going to take a little time, but we're going to celebrate short wins along the way, and we're going to make sure that we're keep trucking with our goals in mind and making sure that we're being successful. Also, it's a lot of results orientation. So we want to see results. Again, it's that action. It's not in theory. We're wanting to see results, looking at that both qualitatively and quantitatively. And in the quantitative measure, we have our tests, our quizzes, and things of that nature. Qualitative, that's where Kloud-12 will really come into play through your reflections and your discussions and your data talks with that. So now we're going to talk about what is the path for effective school improvement through the PLC. So in leadership, you have to form a team that is capable of leading change. So you want to make sure that you have a team that has the capability to lead change and have a team that is willing to lead change. You want to make sure that you have the same goals in mind. Develop urgency and a collective vision for change. You can't have different scattered minds around in a PLC. A PLC has to be collective. You want to also develop collective commitments that lead to action. Clarify and communicate expectations for collaborative teams. So we have to come in with good norms, whether being on time, and we're going to all come in open-minded, have the same heart and vision for success, and we need to communicate those expectations of each other and make sure that we're holding each other accountable in that PLC. Research and lay out how your PLC will be structured and how the PLTs will function within it. I want to take this time now to be very, very clear and specific. A lot of times it's misconstrued, but a professional learning community is only going to happen at the district level as a whole, or it is your school building as a whole. So when you have a district PLC, you have all of your schools functioning together collectively as a part of that PLC. Your school also functions as a PLC, and within that PLC together, you have PLTs, which are professional learning teams. So that may be the English department, it may be your counseling department, it may be secretaries may be in a PLC, it may be your third grade team, it may be science. It is the teams within working together as a collective PLT. They all function together collectively in that PLC. So everyone takes ownership for everything, and that's where we have that job embedded improvement. Okay. With the culture, you have to assess, and transform your culture. So you want to make sure that your culture is alive and that it is reflective of your practices in your school building. If you walk into a school and you have pictures of just bad grades on the wall, or it's dirty floors and things of that nature, that automatically puts you in a bad mode for the culture of that building. You want to walk into a building that is very celebratory of its sports, its arts, its academics, people are smiling. It's a place that you want to be in, and it's a place that everyone has to have that collective vision that we're here for everyone. It is learning for all. We're here collective. And you want to recognize symbols and artifacts that support that and celebrate positive steps along the way. You want to have long-term goals, but really specify in those short-term goals, making sure that you're celebrating those little positive moments along the way. Examine your rituals. Make sure that what you're doing is conducive for learning. Making sure that you're being effective. Celebrate those students that may have just done well in their Read 180 exam, or they may have just passed another subject, or maybe they were all in tune in a classroom discussion. That's a moment to celebrate. A lot of times we fail in the sense that we wait for just those major things to happen, or we're looking at things at the 9-week mark, but it needs to be a daily celebration, and every couple of days celebration is just like formative assessment. You're celebrating those little wins as you're going along. And you want to make sure that you get the right people on the bus. So you can't have people on that bus sitting there unscrewing screws while you're driving down the highway, right? You have to have people that are in the same mindset, that are wanting change and wanting success. 21st century learners, you want to address student needs with classroom intervention and remediation. Address student needs with a school-wide focus on student learning. You want to empower students. Students need to feel like their voice is important and their voice matters. It needs to be heard. And you want to have guaranteed and viable curriculum. So identify those priority standards. For example, and I'm going to step into my ELA background a little bit here. If I were an 8th grade teacher, I may look at ELA, GSC, RL1. That is citing textual evidence. I know that that is something that students have to know before they move on to the ninth grade. They have to be successful in that. And so that's a standard that's going to be a priority. Everyone has to learn this. How do we get them to know this? Now, tone, while that is also important, may just needs to be as a needs to know basis. It's important. It's something that kids need to know. But for this grade level, for this moment right now, that is something that is great to know, but it is not essential. It is not a priority. You don't want to get bogged down by trying to teach and tell everything. Guarantee those 5 to 8 priority standards for that year. Create a proficiency map. Who's going to be proficient? Who's going to be distinguished? Who's are developing? Who's are beginning? How do we know these particular steps as we're going along the way? You want to also unpack standards into learning progressions and student learning targets. Create unit plans. Create daily plans as well to help them along the way. And common assessments. If you're a teacher or you have teachers in your building and they're teaching, and then waiting till like the night before or a couple of days before to actually write that quiz or that test, that's not going to be good for that PLC model. It's not going to be effective for the school. You need to think with the end in mind. So when you're starting off the school year, go ahead and create those common assessments from the beginning, and then make sure that your instruction follows along those paths to make sure the students are getting those essential standards and that they're getting the meat of those standards so that they can be successful on those assessments. You need to determine what to assess, as I was just saying. Determine how to assess using assessment design. So making sure that your assessment meets what you're actually teaching. And determine how to communicate results and respond to student learning. We can't just teach and move on. We have to make sure that it's about learning. So checking our stuff daily, looking at our formative assessments, making sure that everything is in alignment so that we can have a strong PLC and ultimately excellent success in the school. Instruction, you want to design classroom culture that is conducive. You want to plan units of instruction that are powerful, and you want to use first best instructional practices. Remember I said that it's a trial and error basis? That is true. However, you want to also make sure that you're researching the best methods for instruction the first time, and then trying that out and then reflecting and evaluating that. For example, Circle of Learning or Socratic Seminar is a research-based, action-proven instructional practice. So that may be something that you use for discussion. We know that research has shown this is effective. That is a best instructional practice, a first best. Let's try it in our school, in our classroom, and then compare that. If it worked for my classroom, but it may not have worked for Ms. Smith's room, why is that? Or vice versa, if it worked for them, why didn't it work in my classroom? How can we improve that, and achieve on that? And also respond to student learning. Accountability, and you'll notice me say this with Kloud-12 throughout this. Kloud-12 is going to help you do this entire process, but it's elevated here. Kloud-12 is a strong vehicle for your accountability in the PLC, because now you're able to see what is happening in classrooms and you're analyzing that. I'm not just looking at what the teacher is doing, but I'm looking at my students as well. Are my students strongly engaged, or are they just strategically compliant, right? Are they actively engaged in the learning, or are they just sitting there and smiling, and then I get scores that are not what I expected at the end of that time frame? I need to make sure that I'm being accountable and checking it throughout. Promote and embrace leadership accountability. Make sure there's a collective teacher team effort, and promote student accountability as well. So again, using Kloud-12 and the PLC model, we're keeping everyone accountable, from students to teachers to us at the administrative and district level. So now I'm going to talk about cultural shifts in a professional learning community. And you don't have to write this down or anything. You can feel free to type responses in the chat if you want to. But at this time, I want you to just really think about where you are as a school, where you are in a PLC model within your district when I talk about these things. So the first left side is going to always be the traditional classroom. And then the right side is going to be what a PLC actually entails. entails, sorry. So in a traditional classroom, you have a focus on teaching, right? I'm teaching you content. I'm making sure you're getting this content. I'm delivering it constantly, right? We don't know if they got it or not. But a PLC is a focus on learning. What is actually happening? Are the students learning? Are they growing from the information that they're being provided? Are they working collaboratively? Are they inquisitive? Are they asking questions? Is the teacher reflecting on what they're actually doing in the classroom? It is always a focus on learning. Are teachers learning from each other in their data talks, in their PLT teams? From an emphasis on what was taught to a fixation on what students learn. Exactly as I was just saying there, it's not just what was taught, it's what was learned, right? What is being learned. And that's where that formative assessment comes into play. From coverage of content, because a lot of times we want to cover every single thing, to a demonstration of proficiency, right? What is going to make us distinguished in our learning? What is going to get us from plan A to plan B effectively? And what information do we need to get there? Also, you have a shift in the work of teachers. The work of teachers changes. So it's a change from isolation, right, to collaboration. We're not just working on an island. Teachers are not working alone. Everyone is working collaboratively. Everyone's working together because remember, in this PLC, which is your school collectively, everyone wants to see everyone succeed. If I'm the gifted teacher, I'm not just concerned about my students, I'm concerned about how my instruction impacts not only the students I serve in specifically, but also the students that are in RTI, response to intervention, or those students that may be ex-ed or just struggling learners. I need to make sure that I am responsible for everyone because it's a collective effort. It's collaboration, not isolation. Also, from a privatization of practice to open sharing of practice. So we can't just, knowledge is power. We can't just hold on to that knowledge and have it hold for ourselves. We have to make sure we're sharing that. And I'm going to give you a quick story of that. I remember years ago when I was at a certain school, I had awesome scores. I was the English department chair at that time. I had just become that. I was working. I had probably 88% of my students, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like 88% of the students were at the distinguished at that time. We were working hard. We were working smart. It was awesome. And at the end of the year, my principal brought me aside because, I'm sitting there celebrating the school scores weren't great. And my principal told me, he said, Emmanuel, I got to tell you, right now you're acting like a fly at the top of a mess pile. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he's like, you're just this fly buzzing around while we're in the garbage land of mess and everyone's struggling. The school is burning and crashing, and you're just up here flying and dancing because your scores are great. He said, that's awesome, but that is not effective for the school. You need to share what you've done in your class with your team. Share it with your department. Share it with people outside of your department so that we can all grow. And I was really just stunned at that time. And I began to do some PLC work before I even knew what a PLC was because of his comments. And so we worked together collaboratively as a school, and we started to see those changes happen. And I actually learned as well along the way in those things that I was struggling in because we're sharing our strengths. We're sharing our weaknesses at that time. So you can't just hold on to that knowledge that you have. You have to open share. That's how you all reach success. And you have to move from the assumption that these are my students, those are yours, to this is everyone's students. Okay, these are our students. We're in this together. And you also have a shift in focus. So you move from an external focus on issues outside of the school to an internal focus on steps that the staff can take to improve the school. A lot of times people are like, these kids are in poverty, they don't have internet, these parents are blah, 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 blah. And you just go on and off about everything that's happening outside of school. In a PLC, you have to come to the realization that, yes, those things are happening outside of school, but what can I do that is within my control? What is within my grasp? How can I effect change with what we're doing in the school, and how can we do that together, right? That's what you want to focus on, the internal focus of helping, what can you control as a school? And from the focus of inputs to a focus on results, right? We're not just sharing a bunch of opinions, but we're acting on those. It's action-based. It's results orientation. And from goals related from the completion of projects and activities to a SMART goal, demanding evidence of student learning. Another quick thing I remember teaching, this was years ago when I first started in LaGrange, I used to have all these great things happen in my class. I was having poetry cafes. At one time in my mobile unit, I had about 300 people, huge fire marshal code. But I had so many people in there. We had like rotel dip and all these things, superintendent, principals, everyone was in the room, parents, everyone. And it was great. We were sharing poetry and we were talking about, people were singing, dancing, all of that, and everyone loved it. After I started working in the state and I had moved into a different district at that time, I had to come to the realization, you can't continue this like you're doing, because what was the point of that? Did you have a great show? Yeah. Was it a great performance? Yeah. But where was the learning, right? I had to really come to the ownership of that. Where was the learning at? So move beyond the performance to, let's analyze this poetry. Do you really know what you're talking about? What did Maya Angelou or Langston Hughes mean when they said this? Why, right? Move into the analysis of that. So you have to come to a realization in PLCs as well that you're not just completing tasks, you're not just teaching and doing different things, but things need to have a purpose. And you need to have SMART goals where they're measurable and attainable, right? With timestamps on those, where you're analyzing it along the way. It's important in the PLC. You also have a shift in the school culture from independence to interdependence, right? This is not just a one-man show. It's not just a one-team show, but everyone depends on everyone. We need each other to survive. We have to be interconnected. And we have to move from the language of complaint to the language of commitment, right? It only takes that one negative Nancy comment in a meeting to like drag it down, right? You have to be, you can't have that, why are we having to do this? And I don't want to be here. And this is just, why are we doing this stuff? To a level of, you know what? We have a shared purpose. We have a shared vision. These are the results that we want. We're in it to win it. We're committed as a team. Everyone has to be there. Remember, everyone has to be on that bus that is committed. And honestly, in a PLC, if there are people that are on that bus that are not helping to push it along, you know, you have to sometimes let people spread their wings. And I'm saying that in a nice way there, but everyone needs to be on that bus that's committed to learning and helping our kids succeed. And from long-term strategic planning to planning for short-term wins, right? For me, for example, if I sit here and say from January to December, I'm going to lose 100 pounds. Okay, that's a good long-term goal, but the reality is that's probably not going to happen. But if I say, you know what, in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to change my life. So this is for me. My goal is 1 or 2 pounds these next 2 weeks. And guess what? That's a short-term goal. When I do that, it's going to encourage me, hey, I lost 2 pounds these last 2 weeks. I can lose some more, 2 more pounds the next 2 weeks. And you keep going, the next thing you know, you've lost so much weight. It's the same thing with the school building. If you set up your goals, like by the end of December, we're going to have X, Y, Z. And then by April, we're going to have this. The truth is you're going to get discouraged along the way. You have to have those short-term goals. So you know what, in this first week, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to measure that. In the next couple of weeks, this is what we're going to do. And here's how we're going to measure that. And that's where you're going to see that success happen. And before we move on, you don't have to type anything in the chat when I ask you these questions, but you're free to. I'm just going to ask some questions of reflection. I want you to think to yourself, is our PLC at this point right now, right? Or what are we lacking in our process with PLCs and Kloud-12 at this juncture? And I'm going to keep moving on. Have we created a guiding coalition to help implement and sustain our PLC? That's a leadership team. Have we set that in place? Has the staff embraced the premise that the purpose of this school is to ensure high levels of learning for all students? Has the staff established the conditions they must create in the school to help all students learn at high levels, right? Has the staff established the schools or district short-term goals to serve as benchmarks of progress on this PLC journey? Has the school or district created a process for monitoring progress toward the vision, right? Do we know how we're going to get there? And are the 4 critical questions of a PLC driving the work of people throughout the school? There are 4 essential questions that we're about to talk about now that you have to have as a PLC. So I want you to just think about that as we continue on. You can put it in the chat if you want to. I actually just saw something there. We're currently working towards creating a shared vision and environment of collaboration. with our faculty and staff, all CES all the time. I love that. That is so positive, and I know you'll meet that. And you have to have that shared vision. You have to keep moving on with that. And you have to see what elements are we at, where are we at along this path, right? Okay. So now these next few slides are going to be the 4 PLC guiding questions, right? The first slide is always going to be the PLC question. And the second slide right behind that is going to be that Kloud-12 focused question, okay? To help with that, right? How we vehicle that, how we push that vehicle. So the first PLC question is, what do we expect students to know and be able to do? So in answering that question, you have to review state standards and online curriculum, as we said. You have to identify those essential standards for each grade level and subject area using endurance, leverage, and readiness criteria. You need to vertically align essential standards, looking for gaps and redundancies. So for example, what do students need to know in 7th grade to be effective in the 8th grade? And same thing, what do we need to know and be able to do in 8th grade to move to the 9th grade? It's that continuous process, that vertical alignment, right? That's that first PLC question. What do we expect students to know and be able to do? So with Kloud-12, in this question, you need to first develop a Kloud-12 plan with your school for the expectation of teachers and best instructional practices. So what are you expecting teachers to be able to do? How are you expecting them to teach? Are we looking for activating strategies? Are we looking for those strong questioning techniques? Are we looking for inquisitive thinking? Are we looking for collaboration? Are we looking for summarization activities in the classroom? Tickets out the door, all of those things, right? Those are things we're looking for in our school. So you have to do that individually by the school, but create a Kloud-12 plan for what do we expect our teachers to be able to do? And how will they reflect on these practices? Is that going to be something that they're going to do maybe once a week starting off? It may be a couple of times a week. It may be something that in the next couple of weeks you say, you know, this week we're going to look at questioning techniques. In the next couple of weeks, I want you to reflect on your activating strategy. The next week, I want you to concentrate on students and are they actively engaged? Those are the things you want to look for. You want to also develop within this plan expectations of students, right? How should they respond in classrooms? Are our students truly engaged and they're strategically compliant? And what that means is, are our students actually engaged in the learning? Or are they just sitting there smiling and nodding? You know, a lot of times we're strategically compliant. We smile, we know how to play the game. And then when that test or quiz comes back, you're like, oh my God, these kids did not learn that. They did not know what was going on. You need to be able to ask them questions along the way, have that formative assessment throughout, right? And how do we know this? How does the data compare? So when I look at my scores on quizzes, how is that comparing to what I'm seeing on camera, right? Are students actively engaged and participating? And is that showing up on the quantitative side as well when it comes to our quizzes and data talks? Develop a plan for how frequent reflections will be, as I said before. What's doable at your current PLC stage? And how can you advance that? So you might start off 1 time a week, move it to 2 times a week. You want to always progress and make sure that you're being effective along the way. That second PLC question is, how will we know if students have learned it? So you want to make sure that you're unwrapping each of the essential standards into learning targets, determining the learning progression along the way, developing common formative assessments for each of those learning targets, developing those proficiency levels and the rubrics. How are we going to get there? Creating and sharing anchor papers with students. I see this all the time. Teachers are like, go write me an essay, but they need to see what essays are good and what are bad and what are midpoint. They need to see those expectations as a guide for them. How are we doing that? Are we looking for that? And analyze assessment results. And with that Kloud-12 plan, we need to have a plan for instructional review and goal setting through the video recordings. What does our instructional progression look like? How can we reach those targets? What do our walkthroughs look like? And you need to have a good balance of using Kloud-12, you know, where they're reflecting. I need to also look at live videos of Kloud-12 at times if they share it to me. And I also need to make sure that I'm physically moving in the classrooms evaluating as well. You want to develop a plan for collaboration with video recordings. Have we shared lesson recordings and videos with our peers? Have we discussed our issues and wins? And we need to have a plan for data collection using video recordings. So what do our conversations look like? What data are we bringing within our PLTs in regards to our quantitative? So like actual data and reports, and are we bringing in Kloud-12 snippets and reflections? You should always in a PLT meeting, bring some data like that you have from your students, and also maybe bring a 5-10 minute clip of something that worked really well in your classroom and also something that didn't work well so that you can have those conversations. I always said as an administrator, a good question is the best thing you can possibly do. Have your teacher look at the video and say, hey, what do you see here? What could be changed here? And get them talking, get that sparking, right? Want to keep moving on with respect to your time. How we will respond if students have not learned, right? So you want to identify systemic responses for students who are failing or who have not met those goals. Create interventions for students who daily meet those, to meet those learning targets and expectations. Group students for instruction according to what they've missed and what they know, right? Also evaluate the progress of students after these interventions. See what's actually happening and taking place. And within this, with this plan, you want to now move into the part of what's our plan for coaching, right? How are our instructional coaches? How are our assistant principals? How are the principals? How are district level people working with teachers within the PLCs, right? With reflect to their Kloud-12 videos. How we respond to our reflections when we see that instructional practice that just happened wasn't that great. How do we improve our student outcomes? You want to also develop a plan for follow-up and action steps based on data collected with those recordings. So when I look at the reflection of the Kloud-12 video, what are the next steps after both individual and collective reflections, and what interventions and supports fit the needs that are actually shown, okay? And the fourth question is just the opposite of that. How will we respond if students have already learned it? So when we have our gifted learners or those students that are just achieving, how do we respond to that? We need to have a plan for that. And we need to also have extension activities for them to demonstrate that. I'll tell you that I was very guilty a lot of times in school. I would be teaching and, I have these kids over here in the corner that have been done for 20 minutes and they're just sitting there. And I'm like, all right, guys, just wait till everyone else finishes. As I moved on and started looking at my own video reflection, I'm like, this is not how real instruction works. I need everyone learning. And guess what? I just developed me some teacher assistants in my classroom. And I started using those students in the classroom and they were up and moving and helping. And I can see that now from the beauty of Kloud-12. I can use that to my benefit. So what does that plan of action look like, right? And I'm gonna close this off before our questions with the PLC Foundation Continuum, right? Begin to have that plan. So as we finalize, this is from the PLC site. I don't know if you know this, but solutiontree.com is the official PLC website. And I would highly encourage you to use that site along with our resources and with Kloud-12 directly to help you advance your PLC. So you want to look at that shared mission. It goes with what Dr. Ellis was saying as well. You got to have all staff members committed to helping all students learn. And that is from the teachers to the secretaries, to the janitors, the bus drivers, everyone, right? Everyone has to be able to want to learn. Everyone has to be here for the same shared purpose and same goal, right? You want to have a clean room. You can't learn effectively when you have banana peels and milk cartons all over the floor, right? It's not conducive for learning. So everyone plays a part. And you also want to come into a school building where teachers aren't like, welcome to Reddish Elementary School. Get to class. Keep on moving. Keep on moving. That's not positive. It's not the same shared vision. It's like, good morning. Welcome. We're here to learn. It's going to be a great day. I know you can do it. Those are things that encourage our students, right? Everyone takes part in that. Also, in the shared vision, staff members can and routinely articulate those major principles. Have it questioned, have them know what the mission is, have them know what our shared values are, and making sure that we're having a collective commitment that is embraced by staff. And finally, you want to make sure that everyone has those measurable goals. And I would encourage you, give everyone a goal. Let everyone have a measurable goal, from the parapros to secretaries to custodian. I'm gonna make sure this room is clean every day for conducive learning. That's conducive to learning. I'm gonna make sure I greet everyone today in a positive way that's learning for all. As a parapro, I'm going to assist and be present in the class. And what I mean by present is I'm not just gonna sit here in the back and pass out papers when the teacher needs it. I'm going to actively be in the learning process. I'm going to be watching who needs help. Why do they need help? Let me be in the moment, same as teachers. So we have to all be collective in this PLC moment, okay? And that is how you really have everyone share. You should be able at this point in time to unmute yourself. Hopefully you can do that. And at this point in time, if you have a question or anything, you can. Admin number 2.
What Gardner Newman, I think, may be planning to do in the future is to have the teachers, unbeknownst to them, they're going to share a recording with their admin, and then the teachers are also going to view it themselves, and they're going to rate themselves on the TEAC standards. And that way, after that, when I do mine, we're going to get together and say, what did you see and what did I see? And I have a feeling they're going to rate themselves a whole lot harder than I will, but I think that's good. I think then they'll see, they'll self-reflect on what they could do better. What could they plan to do better for the future, and hopefully grow from there.
Yes.
They don't know it's coming yet. So if you hear, Gardner Newman just lost a whole grade level, you know why, because they just got mad at me and walked out. But I think if we start in that direction,
yes,
they can kind of see as they're in the moment, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this what's best for our students? I need to rethink this and go from there.
I love that. And I think that's going to be it's going to provide such great dividends. I would also encourage that when they're doing that, to also have them within their PLTs, share moments of reflection, and maybe not share their exact number and how they reflect themselves per se, but share different components of that. And I think that's going to be awesome, because that'll help you with like the academically classroom, you know what I'm saying?
The
rigor, thank you. The rigor and high levels of instruction, also that positive climate, all of that. I think those are going to also lead to strong conversations, but I think it's going to be wonderful with that. And that honestly is absolutely perfect into that instructional coaching model. So that's awesome.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for attending. For any follow-up questions or to set up a meeting for your school or district leadership team, please contact me at Emmanuel@Kloud-12.com. That's my email. You can also set up a direct meeting with me at calendly.com/Emmanuel Reddish. And we are just so glad to have you, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for attending. And remember, our next coffee chat, part 2 of Improving Professional Learning Communities, is on Thursday, February the 16th. Hope to see you then.